In this lecture, we're going to discuss two constructs which are instrumental to cognitive psychology theory, and those include metacognition and transfer. So let's begin by defining what is metacognition. Well, most generally, it's people's cognition about cognition, or knowledge about knowing and learning. And some people even define it as thinking about your own thinking. However, it is much more complex than this, which is where we'll move to next. More specifically, metacognition can be defined with regard to knowledge and skill. For knowledge, it includes awareness and understanding of your own thought processes, including monitoring your own engagement and monitoring your awareness of your understanding. And this is essential for self-regulation. Next, your awareness and understanding of the extent of your learning capabilities, knowing what you do well versus poorly, and also how you learn best. And this is knowledge of which strategies are best for you. And maybe that's note cards, maybe it's highlighting. And the second line is skills. This is proactive and active regulation of learning processes. In this graph, we're trying to represent where metacognition takes place, and that is in the central executive. The central executive integrates sensation and perceptions, which occur in the sensory register, with long-term memory information to create a coherent metacognitive thought. The central executive, which again is where metacognition takes place, can be thought of as an office manager who organizes and executes current activities in the office we call the brain, including self-talk, such as, here's an example, okay, go back and read it again because you were thinking about what you did last night and nothing from the last paragraph stuck. This is something you might say out loud to yourself as you're reading, and this is occurring in the central executive and is an example of metacognition. Also, when you hold two or more concepts in working memory in order to compare, contrast, or combine them. When you recognize when it's time to go ask for your help, and when you walk into a room and think, now why did I come in here in the first place? These are all examples of metacognition that take place in the central executive. This office manager, or the central executive, organizes and executes future and past office activities in the brain. For instance, it plans for learning, including the what, when, where, and how, which are contextual strategies. It also assesses and incorporates discoveries from successes and mistakes in the learning process. Each of these functions represent self-regulated learning. Metacognition and self-regulated learning are intimately intertwined. For this reason, let's now turn to self-regulation. I'll very briefly describe self-regulation here, and that is regulating your own study strategies or behavior, and this includes three components. Self-regulation's three components are planning, thinking about ahead what you're going to need to do to be successful, monitoring, trying to monitor your behavior as it's occurring and if it's being successful or not, and then evaluation. After the fact, after your behavior, go back and think about your strategies, if they're effective or not, and what you can do to change them to be more effective. So with self-regulation in mind and all this monitoring and evaluation of study strategies, I want you to take a second and write down your own study and learning strategies that are effective for you. Me personally, I like to use mnemonics and elaborative rehearsal, which means relating incoming information to your prior knowledge. On the other hand, my wife prefers note-taking and note cards. So take a minute, write down your own strategies, pause the video, and when you're finished, press play. So here are some effective learning strategies. And maybe there's some of the ones that you wrote down on your list a moment ago. These include meaningful learning and elaboration, which is relating to prior knowledge. Organization, people generally do outlines, graphic organizers, concept maps, or timelines. Note-taking, which includes attention, encoding, external storage, and queuing. Identification of important information, and this is done in books by using bold letters or highlighting. Summarizing after you read or receive a lecture. Monitoring your own comprehension. Using mnemonics, such as HOMES, which are all the Great Lakes. Using acronyms. Using the acrostic method. And finally, the method of loci. And what is that? Well, it puts items to be remembered in a physical location as a mental representation in your mind. And then you walk through the location and remember or retrieve things. And so now let's move to this idea of transfer. This occurs when learning in one situation affects learning or performance in another. There are two types of transfer. The first is positive transfer, and this is when knowledge or skill about a previous topic help a student learn a new skill or learn about a new topic. For example, in driver's ed, you learn something, you learn concepts in class by notebook and paper, and you hope that they help you when you get out and begin to drive on the road. Positive transfer is more likely to occur if the individual recognizes common features, if you link information in your memory between contexts, and if an individual sees value in the information. The second kind of transfer is negative transfer, and this occurs when knowledge or skills about a previous topic hurt a student or interfere with learning about a new skill or topic. This can occur when learning different languages. When you learn Dutch and Spanish simultaneously, these languages are very different and they may actually interfere with each other. Two types of transfer are low road and high road transfer. Low road transfer is when you use a previous skill in a new setting that is similar to the setting where the skill was first learned. And this is an optimal opportunity for transfer to occur. For example, surgery with a cadaver is very similar to surgery on a live person. The next is high road transfer. And this occurs when using a rule or strategy or skill in a new task or problem that is very different from the original setting. For example, a lot of people like to make a connection between chess and politics, two very different things that have similar strategies involved. Now, transfer is more likely to occur in the low road situation because the contexts are more similar. Here are some factors that affect transfer. The first is meaningful versus rote learning. The more meaningful you learn something, the more likely it is to transfer. The next is thoroughness of learning. Of course, the more thorough and deeply you learn something, the more likely it is to transfer. The next, the more similar the situations are, the more likely it is to transfer. Remember the low road transfer scenario. Principles versus facts. Principles more easily transfer than facts. The number and variety of examples. The more examples that you get, the more likely they are to transfer. Next, the less time that elapses between tasks, the more likely it is to transfer. Sociocultural expectations can influence transfer. If the context is a familiar sociocultural situation, it's more likely to transfer. Emotions can impact transfer. If you enjoy learning, it's more likely to transfer. If you have anxiety or fear, well, it's less likely to transfer. And motivation impacts transfer. If you really value the content, well, it's more likely to transfer. So what are the teaching implications from this metacognition and transfer lecture? First, it's important to explicitly teach metacognition and self-regulations to students. Be explicit about this. Tie it into your curriculum. And you do this through practice and feedback. Give them practice planning, monitoring, and evaluating their learning strategies, and give them feedback and let them practice again. And finally, meaningful, authentic, and contextualized learning is most likely to lead to transfer.